Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar with myself, Marie, and I am joined today by the clever Sean Deaver. He is going to be going over new hiring practices and 2022, can you believe it, payroll budgeting. Hi, Sean. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks. Good to be here. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm in Vancouver, Canada, and we have snow on the ground. So everybody, if you just want to drop in the chat where you were joining us from, just to give everybody a couple of minutes to get on in. So like I said, Sean is with Express Payroll. I'm on the marketing team here at Jackrabbit. So before Sean gets right into everything today, I am just going to go over some of the time clock basics. So don't worry, it's not going to be a long drawn out thing. It's just a few minutes. So I'm going to actually just start sharing my screen. So it'll be just a moment. There we go.
I see a Las Vegas out there. Just going to call out. I'm heading to Vegas on Thursday.
Yeah, you're just
I'm very excited.
Yeah, be good to get out in front of people again, that's for sure. Yeah. So the very first thing that I just want to go over with you is just the basics of what the time clock is. So Jackrabbit's time clock feature, it's designed to give your organization and managing your employee hours and preparing them for the payroll process. So the time clock offers a whole slew of different things. So you can have your departments for kind of like little buckets for your staff hours. You can have multiple methods of time entry. You can break things out by location and or department per time entry. There are staff pay rates that you can include. And as well, you can right away, once you get ready to export, you can actually get an estimate of your gross wages. And then the very last thing you'll want to do is go ahead and export everything over to Express Payroll so that you can take that little pressure off of you. So the very first thing that I am going to show you are just a couple of settings under your staff portal. So if we come here to staff portal, and under your portal settings. So the very first thing I just want to show you is that you have the ability here to enable your time clock, and as well if you want to allow remote time clock. So you can allow your staff to log in through their staff portal and have the ability to enter in their time there. And then as well, if we just scroll down to the bottom, you can see here, I have these 6 different time clock departments. And then as well, I have my pay periods. In my database, I have it set up to have a weekly pay period. And then as well, just some time entry settings. So your time buffer, how long they can be logged in before they are logged out. And then the next little thing I want to show you is just what it looks like on your staff. So we're just going to come here to Christine. And I'm just going to show you her compensation tab. So right here, you can see that she has a base hourly rate and then her department rate for birthday parties, working in the office, and then another separate rate for teaching and coaching. So if I were to just come here, I'm just going to click on teaching and coaching. And then you can see, so I've got my department rate and then whatever my hourly rate is that I want to be. So let's just say it's $30 an hour. And then I've got, it's effective from, I went with the calendar year. So from January 1st until December 31st. And then I will just save that. And then next we are going to come over here to your time clock. So everybody, it really is just as simple as that. So Christine would come into her staff portal here. She could enter her time. I went ahead and entered it. And then once they save changes, and then we'll just come back up here. Oopsies. And then we're going to come here to your staff. And then all you will need to do is you want to approve, or if you've already approved, you need to go back in maybe an unapproved time. So I'm just going to come right here to my current pay period. And we're just only going to bring up Christine for today, just so that you can see that. And I'm just going to select this to no and this to no. And then right here. So you can see I've got all of Christine's hours. These line up with exactly what she had entered here in her portal. And I can come in here right away and I can check all of my rows. So I know everything is all good to go. And then I can close my pay period. And then I can preview it. And then if I had unapproved time, I could check it there. So the next, under your time clock, I am going to, oopsies, sorry, close my pay period. And then come to my time clock here. And then right here, I can easily just come here. If I was using QuickBooks, I could export it to QuickBooks, or better option, I can export everything out to Express Payroll just by clicking right here.
Awesome. And thank you, Marie. That's one very great demo there. And as you can see, it is very time saving. We hear from folks all the time how payroll is a painful thing to do and they don't enjoy it. And I don't want to say that the time clock makes it enjoyable, but at least takes the pain and suffering out of it. And we've heard some amazing feedback from clients that both use the export as well as our side when we receive it in the payroll, that it takes the processing time from hours down to minutes. And one of the things I do want to point out, which is very unique to Jackrabbit, is as Marisa pointing down at the bottom, they have something for payroll codes. And the industries that we both service, gymnastics, dance, swimming, music, theater, and so forth, it's oftentimes where we see people get paid a fixed dollar amount as opposed to an hourly rate. So for example, if you have a competition fee or a meet fee or a private lesson fee that you want to pay someone, Jackrabbit very uniquely included this so that you can add these types of competition fees, birthday party rate fees, things where you're paying someone maybe $100 or for an event $200 or something along those lines. You can add these directly as well right into the time clock, and then that gets all exported/imported right into our system. So it's a nice feature that they added, and again, I think it's just a testament to how over the years they've listened to what their clients ask for and what they need, and built it accordingly. So I'm glad you're able to let me speak on that page there.
No problem. So I am just going to stop my share. Sean has some slides that he is going to bring up for you. And just to speak to the payroll codes, you can completely customize those to whatever it is that you need for your specific organization. They're not Jackrabbit tied.
Perfect. Now, this portal's unique to me. Can you see my screen of the payroll software?
Yeah.
Oh, you can? Oh, perfect. Okay, good. I wasn't going to spend too much time on this because the purpose of the presentation ultimately is to talk about higher level payroll budgeting, staffing, some updates and so forth. But I did want to at least spend a minute or two talking about, payroll and how it works on our system. So as Marie pointed out, the time clock that's utilized by Jackrabbit, it was created in conjunction with our payroll system. And this is the natural output for it. We are a full service, full solution payroll. You would be getting the same level of service as you would or expectation from a national provider or a regional provider. We just do it at a much more streamlined process and cost. So there's typically a 50% to 40 to 50% savings on some of the national providers that you'll find or that you'll know of. I won't mention any names, of course. As well as even the online programs that you go in and you do all the work on your own. You'd be getting the expertise and specialization from us and our full service staff, and you'd be saving money. Additionally, for those that aren't aware, Intuit, which has Intuit Online Payroll or IOP, they officially have announced that as of the end of this year, they are abandoning the program. So if you are using that, you do need to find an alternative. And of course, we would certainly welcome you as clients if needed. I won't go into too much detail on how the payroll system works, but as Marie mentioned, we have a time clock. They have a time clock. It then ultimately would be paired up with our time clock in the payroll system. So when you export those hours, they're actually importing right into our system. As you can see, we've also created, this is a phony account, of course, but we have created departments. This one happens to be called Jim Rick Admin, And then we have swimming and lifeguarding and private lessons and cleaning and I have a dance one over here. So depending upon what how you want to pay your people, we can offer you these ultimate categories that you can see how much money you're spending in each of these different divisions or pay types, if you will. We would of course process the payroll, process any direct deposit or manual checks, file all your taxes, pay all of your taxes, and again. I'll just reiterate, and I want to reiterate this because it's important to me to highlight my team on this side. We have an amazing customer service department. You are not being off-roaded to a different country or to anyone outside the United States. All of our folks are here. We have multiple offices, but they're all centered here. They are specialists in the fields that you practice in. And, it's rare that we don't pick up the phone on a first or second phone call. We're available for 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. That's both Eastern and, that is Eastern time. So if you have any questions, any problems or anything like that, we're certainly here to help. And one of the biggest compliments that we receive, and I'll attribute this to my staff, my wonderful staff, when people come over from large houses or self-service, online programs and get a taste of our program and our staffing, I'm usually getting compliments and nice Google reviews at how well our staff are able to handle any issues or any questions that they have along the way. So if anybody wants a demo, I'll have some contact information at the end if you'd like to talk about it further. I talk about some of the highlights and features and so forth. But for next, what I will do is I'm going to turn it over to myself and talk a little more presentation about hiring practices and payroll budgeting. And I've got a couple other tidbits in there for folks. So please pay attention. And if you have any questions, Maria, are you managing an inbox or chat room of questions? Are we going to do that as we go along? Okay, perfect.
We got a couple here. We'll just answer these just because they're kind of just what you just talked about.
Yeah.
One person just asked, what if I have 2 locations and use Express Payroll and you have employees at both locations? How does it export to the correct location for Express Payroll?
Yeah, so the couple ways of handling that, we can, number one, you can export 2 items, two locations from Jackrabbit directly to us. That would certainly be probably the recommended. We typically do it that way. So if you have like a north and a south location or something like that, we traditionally get 2 separate exports from Jackrabbit. That's how we would typically handle that.
Okay, and then this just goes back to what you just said at the beginning there. Jackie's like, wait, did I hear that correctly? QuickBooks is getting rid of payroll services.
Yes, it's specifically into IOP, which is Intuit Online Payroll. So that's not, that is owned by QuickBooks. But if you're using, so they do have another option available. But if you're using IOP specifically, that is being sunset. It's no longer available after this year.
Okay, so not QuickBooks in general or payroll. That's good to know. Okay, continue on. I will politely interrupt you if anything else.
Yeah, feel free to cut me off anytime.
Sure.
All right. So I guess I probably should have done this in the beginning and I didn't, is introduce who I am. My name is, for those that I don't know, is Sean Deaver. I'm a CPA and financial planner. I'm based out of the Boston area, and my firm and I service a little over almost 1,500 gymnastics, dance, swim, music, theater type schools across the United States. That's our specialty. That's our focus. We provide tax, payroll, bookkeeping, consulting, tax planning type services to those industries. So again, the people that are on the call right now are very familiar with the industry that you're in. Most of my clients are in those industries. So I always welcome the opportunity to share some information and current trends and so forth. And anytime I can get in front of a couple hundred people, I certainly welcome that to share whatever information and knowledge I have. And as I just demoed there a little bit, I'm also the founder of Express Payroll. And Express Payroll, for those that don't know, was created and launched due to the Jackrabbit time clock. So myself and Mark Mahoney, who were very close friends, at least I tell him that because he sends me really nice Christmas gifts. No, I'm just kidding. Him and I embarked upon it at the same time. And so, with the Jackrabbit time clock came the Express Payroll. So for 11 years now, we've been running strong and working those two together. So it's been a pleasure. Express Payroll is independent of Jackrabbit. So, we are two separate companies. We're partners, but at the end of the day, we of course work very closely together, and we service a lot of the same clients. Today, I'm going to talk about a few things, 2020 and 2021, the year in review, we're talking payroll, staffing, hiring, that, trends, so on and so forth. And as my next bullet point there talks about staffing trends. We'll talk about payroll budgeting for the upcoming year, and spend a little bit of time in a couple slides on that, talk a little bit about some of those things at the end and some things to be cautious of, minimum wage increases and the like. And then lastly, I don't have a slide on it, but I figured I did want to spend a minute talking about the ERTC. For those of you that aren't aware, I'm sure everybody in 2020 and 2021 has heard the three letters of PPP, Paycheck Protection. I'm sure everybody knows, and probably most of you, if not all of you, receive that money. And most of you, if not all of you, have also probably heard of the Employee Retention Tax Credit. This was U.S. These were both U.S. programs, so I apologize if anybody on the outside, you may not have heard of it, but so these are U.S. programs. They were put in place to help small business owners account for the payroll costs associated with shutting down during the pandemic. And the PPP was a godsend. They came out in two different programs. Most of us have received those. Many of us have actually been forgiven for both rounds. And that was a non-taxable item for us. So that really, really, really helped owners across the last 2 years. And then to supplement, in addition to the Paycheck Protection, the government came out with something called the Employee Retention Tax Credit, which many of us also participated in. If you didn't participate in that program, you are likely eligible. I would certainly encourage you to reach out to me at the end. We are helping clients and non-clients. And at the very least, if you'd prefer to go someplace else, contact your own CPA. But I would certainly make sure that you're familiar with this program and determine and identify whether you qualify or not. Unfortunately, with this program, it has not rolled out as quickly as we would have liked. At the beginning, it became very popular, and there were about 20 million applications submitted within a 2 to 3 month window. And the IRS came out publicly and stated that they only had about 3 people working on the program. And they all were sent in manually, not electronically. So what we can do with computers, they couldn't even do because they were accepting them only manually. This program was put on pause, not from submitting, but from processing and approving. And about 3 weeks ago, we noticed the wheels moving a little bit again. We did start to see some clients get refunds. We have seen some letters go out from the IRS. So we're hopeful. Well, at least now we know that they're officially processing again. They did hit the pause button, but they're back up to doing it. So for those that did apply in the program, maybe you've applied through us, maybe applied through someone else. I don't want you to get depressed. It's, we'd love to have that money now as soon as possible. Some of us really need it. I don't want you to be concerned about the program. It's there. It's fully funded. It's just unfortunately, they're just completely overwhelmed. The SBA and the local banks are who handled the PPP and the EIDL or the EIDL loans. So that's why that's why we saw a lot quicker turnaround. There were millions of people working on those as opposed to 3 people working on the ERTC. So again, nothing to be worried about. It's just a timing issue, but I wanted to make sure since I had some people's attention that I at least mention that. So now let's move into a little bit of what we're all feeling. Again, as I mentioned, we service about the number's over 1,400. So we're going to round up to 1,500 to make myself sound more impressive than I really am. But we'll use the number 1,500 businesses. And then I work with a lot of others outside of my clientele, whether it be consulting or conferences and so on. And everyone seems to be having the same exact issue. We are fully, we waiting lists. Our doors are full, our classes are full, and we are still short-staffed. We don't have enough staff. We can't find people to fill the positions to teach our classes. And that is a very real scenario in the industries that you folks service, as well as pretty much everywhere: restaurants, transportation, bus companies, you name retails, you name it. As a matter of fact, this first bullet on my screen here, there are currently 10 million job openings and 8.4 million people unemployed. So it's pretty amazing right now that we have more jobs than we can fill. And there are millions of people unemployed. So it's kind of a double whammy here. These people, unfortunately, are not looking for these jobs. So again, it just makes it a little harder than we need. Every small business is hurting at all levels of staffing. I can tell you if there are any people out there that want to become accountants, please let me know. I've got several openings here. And I'm sure each of you are feeling a little bit of pain in all of your departments at your local businesses. Pay rates have been are on the rise. They're rising rather quickly. It causes concern for me, especially in the industries that you guys participate in. And we'll talk a little bit about this later. But the issue, of course, is that the pandemic still exists. COVID hospitalizations are at the highest levels that they've been last January. We're starting to see elective surgeries in most states be put on hold again, like we did last year. The rates of people still catching COVID is higher and higher. Schools are closing down for 2 weeks to 3 weeks between December and January throughout the country to try to let this, now that we know the holidays are coming up, we're expecting these rates to continue, these numbers to rise again. So it's a very real thing. It still exists. Fortunately, they're not shutting businesses down like they had before, and I don't think they ever can again. But it's certainly something we need to keep an eye on. One thing that was really interesting was many of you were aware in the U.S. we had federal unemployment stimulus, or they were called kickers, that went on in addition to unemployment. So there were a lot of people on unemployment. They were receiving their normal state unemployment wage, and then they were receiving at one point an additional $600 of federal supplements, and then it went down to $300 of additional federal supplements. But those are all expired. And when those did expire, we had actually anticipated or expected to see the economy pick back up. Unfortunately, it really had very little, if any, impact on people going and taking those additional jobs. As I mentioned in the slide previous, there are still 10 million positions open, and there are people just not applying for those jobs. The issue that we're seeing, and just thought I'd pass this information on, is that currently there's a gigantic reallocation going on in our economy. People that had jobs before, they're not going and taking those same type of jobs. Workers are shifting to do work that they want to do, and where they want to do it. We're noticing more people asking and requiring remote work that didn't exist before. We're seeing people go back to school or take online courses. We're seeing people get into career paths and career opportunities that they had never done before. We're seeing restaurant workers become truck drivers. We're seeing truck drivers become, I don't know, something else. But we're seeing people just shift what they do, and especially in jobs like we have, where we're very facing with the public, and more yet, we're facing with children who are, not that that's a bad thing, but of course, when it comes to COVID, it can be a riskier thing. So people, school teachers are dropping, educators. It's been unparalleled, the number of educators that are leaving their jobs and resigning. Those statistics and percentages are up dramatically. So again, we're seeing it everywhere. I don't want you to think that you're alone. But this is one of the reasons, again, this reallocation that's going on is the reason for it. Resignations are up 13% now over pre-pandemic levels. There are 4.9 million people not even looking for work in addition to what we saw prior to the pandemic. So these are people that were working. They got let go during the pandemic, or they left work voluntarily during the pandemic, and they are just not interested in moving back to the workforce. 3.6 million people retired during the pandemic, which was 2 million more than expected. So there, again, we have 2 million jobs that didn't exist before, and typically retired people, traditionally in most careers and most career paths, they are at the higher end of whatever it is that they do. So now you have this opportunity for people below them to move up a level on the ladder, and that opens up lower jobs or maybe entry-level jobs and people that weren't be qualified or wouldn't get those jobs in the past. You're now seeing people are applying for them and getting them. I have, a lot of people that I know that own clubs. Myself, I own a few clubs, are financially involved with a few clubs. We see a lot of people that were in our clubs that were doing the work that we need them to do have gone on to do things entirely different. The other thing that we're seeing with a lot of staff, and if you've got younger people that are coming back, we're seeing huge boosts in entrepreneurship. People are just starting their own business. Right now, if you wanted to sit at home and buy things online and turn around and sell them on Amazon, you can do that and reasonably make somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 a year without doing a lot of heavy lifting. And I know that because last year I had 11 new clients that started buying things at the grocery stores and selling them on Amazon and making between $30,000 and $50,000. So they're no longer interested in going in and doing traditional work. If they can sit at home and do something on the internet or buy or sell or get involved in something else that's less customer facing. So it's a really interesting shift that we're seeing. And obviously all of us, again, are being impacted. Teachers and educators, as I mentioned before, are quitting in huge numbers and don't expect to return. And this is unfortunately due to some studies and some interviews. Many of them feel that during the pandemic at the very beginning, the way they were, I'm going to use the word treated, because that's the word that came out, is now they felt they were treated, they were just cut loose. There was a slight hiccup in the pandemic. They shut their doors down and all the staff were immediately terminated or furloughed or laid off or whatever the case may be. There wasn't a lot of here's what's going to, communication done. People were just, sent to the unemployment offices. Of course, many of you heard about the struggles that took place in the unemployment offices. So these people now have lost their loyalty to who, to who they want to work for in the future and so forth. So, I thought I'd share that with you because teachers and educators, that was their number one reason for why they're not coming back. And, I can understand the sentiment. So I thought I'd share that. In the gymnastics, swim, and dance industries, so here's some statistics I'll pull directly out of our payroll system. Prior to the pandemic in 2019, we had roughly 50,000 employees in these industries that we paid and processed through our system on a, whether they were paid weekly, biweekly, what have you. In 2020, that number dropped to 28,000 at the lowest point. So you can see now that's somewhat of an unfair number because that's just people that maintained in the system. It doesn't mean that we continued to pay 28,000, but we did see a drop obviously during 2020, and then we kind of saw it level off around the 28,000 number. Currently, using the same number, we actually pay more clients, more than 50,000 employees. But I went back to 2019 and I said, if they were a client in 19 and they're still a client in 2021, let's include them in the survey. If they were new in 2021 or new in 2020, I had to remove them because I wanted this to be an apples to apples comparison. So currently, of the number of employers and the number of employees that were employed in 2019, the same employers, they're only at a staffing level currently of about 38,000, which is 76% hired back. So again, you can see if you're having if you're feeling that in your own business, you can understand here that it would make sense if you were with the large majority of people in our industry that only about 76% of your staff is hired back. you would be amongst the averages of the rest of our peers. So we're feeling it everywhere. But again, I wanted to make sure that I didn't just talk about high level, the global economy. This is drilled down specifically, to my clientele. And again, the bulk of my clientele are gym, swim, dance, music, theater type industries. So that pinch is very real. With the staffing shortage, what people are doing, and here's where I want to shift kind of the next part of our presentation, is as we talk about budgeting for 2022 and talk about ways to maybe help this out, is a lot of people are raising prices or raising pay rates. My apologies here. And that's a natural reaction. And as you can see here, on average, owners are raising wages about 8.8% for non-managerial employees in the last 7 months. So if you called up your payroll provider and said, bring everyone from 12 to 13 or 13 to 1450 or whatever it is, on average, people have increased wages 8.8%. Now, I want to make sure that people on the phone or listening on the web here understand that in the industries that we service, our biggest expense and our most dangerous expense is actually payroll. This is the one where if you do it wrong, your business will not, perhaps never make money, or if it does make money, maybe won't make enough money. So it's important that you understand that 8.8%, if your payroll represented 10% of your business and you made $1 million a year and your payroll was 100,000, 8.8% is $8,000, $9,000. That's a good chunk, but $9,000 on $1 million of revenue really isn't a huge deal. In our industry, payroll can many times represent 40 to 50% of our total intake. So if that's the case, 8-9%, if you took a look, I have a couple examples here, 8.8% on, if your payroll's 300,000, that's $26,000 increase. If your business is only making, 5 or 600,000 in revenue, that could be 4 or 5 additional percentage points coming out just directly to payroll. And if your payroll's 400,000 on average, that's a $35,000 increase over the course of the year. Now, many of you might think going from $10 to $11 an hour isn't a big deal, but that's a 10% increase. That's huge. And as you can see, on average, most of our clients run around $300,000 to $400,000 in payroll during the course of the year. And 8.8% could be somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000. That's a lot of money. So you need to be very careful that you understand when you are raising prices, what this is doing to you and how it's going to impact your overall finances, especially with numbers this large. We always like to look at revenue and our expenses as a percentage of revenue. I've done this slide 100 times, but I never ever will take it out because it's the most important thing I can share. If you think about your sales in total and how your money should be divvied up, this is a really well divvied up business. This shows, 10 to 15% maybe of our business going to profit, 20% of our business going to rent, 40% of our revenue going to labor, and the rest going to what we call other, which would be everything else: utilities, marketing, professional fees, merchant fees, insurance, benefits, you name it. But as you can see, the largest part of where our revenue goes is labor, and 40% is good. Many of us are paying 50%, 55%. So if that's what you're doing and you're now putting an 8.8% increase on top of that, that can really start to eat away. And the only thing it's likely eating away, of course, is profitability. So you need to be really careful in how you manage these increases that we're offering and what to do with them. And I have some thoughts on maybe how to look at it differently, but I want to make sure that you fully understand and appreciate that your total business, the way you want to look at it. I always like to take, every year, if not more regularly, I like to take a look at my client split and where they spend their money and how they're spending it. And again, labor is the most important item for me to focus on because it is usually the one we spend the most money on. And by doing, things like raises, that has an impact. Doesn't mean that we're not supposed to give raises, and it doesn't mean that we're not supposed to, care about our people and so forth. But obviously, again, if this is your biggest number and you're going to add to it, you need to make sure that you're adjusting for it elsewhere. Now, just some benchmarks, and this will also help and talk a little bit about our 22 budgeting. Again, understanding your payroll amounts, because this is your largest expense, needs to be your focus. This is what you need to spend your time on. Every quarter, every month, every year, you should be looking at your payroll, how much money you're spending on it, what can you do to trim it, what options are, what things are available for you to make this, part of your analysis to make sure that you don't get yourself into trouble. If you're a gymnastics business, traditionally we see 35 to 50% of your revenue spent on payroll costs. If you're a dance business, we traditionally see somewhere between 35 and 40% of your revenue spent on payroll costs. In swim schools, we traditionally see somewhere around 40% of revenue spent on your payroll costs. And I say traditionally, but what I really mean is these are your benchmarks. This is where you should be. I've seen payroll in the gymnastics business as high as 75%. Those people don't make any money. They're losing a ton of money. So it's important that you stay within these benchmarks. As I mentioned earlier, if you're amongst your peers and adding 8.8% to payroll, that's going to be another 4% of your revenue going to these. So now, instead of being 35 to 50, you might be at 39 to 54% if you did in fact pull the trigger on that 8.8% increase in pay rates. So again, doesn't mean that you can't do it, but if you do that, then you have to do something else to keep those numbers back in the 35 to 50% range. Really, the only way to do that is to increase your pricing or increase the number of people attending your school, number of students. So again, make sure you understand how much money of your revenue is going to payroll. Try to keep it to these ranges, and if so, you'll be in good shape. And again, if you do have to pay raises, I get it. You just need to make sure you still do something else, whether it's to fill up more classes, increase your ratios. Maybe you have to swap out senior instructors for junior instructors. Maybe you have to raise the prices that you're charging. Maybe you have to cut your class from an hour to 50 minutes. Whatever it is you have to do, but you have to maintain these ratios: 35 to 50 for gym, 35 to 40 for dance, or 40 for swim. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself in trouble in looking at this pie right here, because all the other items have to, somehow or another, someone has to make up for the overage. So you need to be careful, because that's likely going to be your profit. Now, I won't spend too much time on this, but in the event that you do find yourself, let's say, above these ranges, let's say these ranges, you're outside these ranges, maybe you're on the high end, maybe you're gymnastics and you're at 50, 55. Maybe you're at dance and you're at 40, 45, or maybe you're at swimming and you're at 45% or something. Something to keep in mind that, one of the major reasons that typically happens is that the number of hours that you're paying, or what we call your utilization rate, is typically the reason why you're spending too much money on payroll. You're paying for too much admin time, perhaps. Maybe you're paying for people to be there 10 or 15 minutes early and they don't have anything going on. So maybe you need to consider having them only arriving there 5 minutes early. Or maybe after the class is done, they have to leave sooner. If you have 50 or 45-minute classes, it's funny, last year during the pandemic, I had given a presentation and I had said one of the things that we were doing in our clubs is we were going from 60-minute classes to 50-minute classes. And someone else decided to do that and followed my lead. But what we had done by moving from 60 to 50 is we were able to add another class time or additional revenue at the end of the day. This person didn't do that. So they just cut the class time. They didn't add anything extra. So their rate, they weren't understanding why the percentages didn't change. Our percentages changed because we were able to fit another class in at the end of the day and still paying the same payroll. So that could potentially, that's what we call utilization. We paid for the same number of hours as we did yesterday, but we have an extra class in there, so we're making more money. So that is how we were able to bring our ratios or our percentages down a bit. But that's something to keep in mind, is that if your payroll is too high on the range spectrum there, that might be one thing to keep in mind.
Sean, I have a question for you.
Yeah, go for it, please.
Do these numbers, so the payroll numbers, do they include the owner's payroll?
Great question. And yes, they do for the owner's, I'll say, working hours. So as an owner, let me give you a very black and white example. I own a gym and I don't go to the gym, yet I'm in the payroll. So I draw a $12,000 a year or $1,000 per month paycheck. Now, in that case, since I don't do anything for the gym, that would not be a number I would include in there, because it's just me paying it for, for tax purposes and whatever. However, if I was an on-site owner, and let's say I did pay myself, let's say $30,000 for coaching and teaching and doing in the office work, but let's say, let's just say I did that. If that's commensurate with the work that I perform, then of course that should be included in these ranges. Now, with that being said, sometimes we overpay ourselves. So in my example, I'm overpaying myself for me because I'm not there. So if I, let's say for tax reasons, have paid myself $100,000, that might skew these ranges to the high end, because maybe I'm not really worth 100. Maybe I'm only worth 50,000 from the coaching and the teaching aspect. So you would want to look at that. For my coaching and my working time, it should be included in there, but anything additional should be excluded from those ranges. Great question.
So just so I make sure I had it clear for everybody else. So would it be right to say, if it was anything that if you weren't in your business doing it, that you would have to pay somebody else to do? Say
Yes,
teaching the class, doing admin, right? Okay.
That's right. Your replacement is what exactly your replacement cost is, the way we would look at that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, good. All right. So moving on to some alternatives. So let's say, here's one thing that we didn't do. I did not want to get caught in the trap of raising pay rates immediately, because I didn't want to fall into that 8.8%, hole, if you will, that many of my peers did. So one of the things that we suggested to clients, and we did ourselves internally, is we tried to do a few things. Number one, we tried to, since we have fewer staff, we tried to make do with what we had. We made sure that all of our classes were absolutely full. We did look to, as I mentioned earlier, we went from 60-minute classes to 50-minute classes this year. In some instances, we went down to 45-minute classes. So again, we're able to put more classes in the same amount of time that an instructor is here, so we're utilizing them better. But I would really look to, the other thing we did is we just decided as an organization, we're going to run with less. I didn't want to be hiring bad people or dangerous people or unsafe people. So we decided, and by the way, we just didn't have bodies applying. So one of the things that we did was we just decided to run our classes with fewer folks. So that's something to keep in mind. Maybe I've heard this from a lot of people. They've just decided to get rid of some unprofitable days, unprofitable time slots, unprofitable classes, and they have less headaches, more free time, and in some instances actually making more money. A lot of us during pre-pandemic time were running classes that if you went back and you did the math, even though your ratios might say 8-1 or 9-1, you might have only been at 3.4-1 or 4.5-1. So you were running a whole bunch more classes but they were half full. Well, now many of us are running fewer classes, but they're all full. So don't panic. I had one woman call me up. She's a payroll and tax client. She immediately did $1 across the board raise through payroll. And before, unfortunately, she announced it to her staff. So it wasn't anything I can do. But of course, then we sat down and I spoke with her and went back and did some math and come to find out she's actually running more profitably with fewer people. The problem was she was looking at the number of class slots she had on her Jackrabbit database, and she had 100 before and she only has 80 now. So that put her into a panic, and she has a little bit of a waiting list. And I said, listen, let's look at the numbers instead. You're focusing on the wrong thing. Don't look at the number. Don't look at your calendar. Look at your profit and loss statement. And we come to find out she was actually making more money and more profit running fewer classes. So don't be blind to that. Make sure you're paying attention to the full picture. I know that many of us, again, we operate on different metrics and we look at different key performance indicators. And the number of slots should not be a performance indicator. The amount of money sitting in your bank account is the real driver here. So make sure you take a look at that to see if can you run with fewer classes. Maybe you don't do gymnastics on Fridays anymore, or maybe you shut down until 3 p.m. on a few days. Whatever the case may be, make sure you're considering that in your analysis. Remember, also, pay ranges are based on experience and what staff do, not how long they've been there. I get this question a lot, and it bothered. I don't really have any better answer to say. When we set our pay scales, based on what you do for the organization. Oftentimes I find and I talk to people and they pay their staff based on how long they've been there. So every year, okay, you've been with me 3 years, you're making $10 an hour. Now I'm going to pay you 11. And after year after that, I'm going to pay you 12. And year after that, I'm going to pay you 13. The year after that, I'm going to pay you 14. And then you have a new person start. Maybe they start at 9 or 10. And I often say, well, how much are you charging for a class for person A? And you're saying, it's $800 a month. And how much are you charging for a class for person B? It's also $100 a month. So if you're only charging the same, you can only pay the same. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be a range, like not everybody has to make $10, but you could say all of our rec coaches make between $10 and $12 an hour. And that's it. I don't care if you've been with me 1 month or 110 years, you're somewhere between $10 and $12 an hour. Now, if you're teaching our rec classes and our team classes, or our rec classes and our birthday parties or something like that, well, then you're taking on more responsibility. Or maybe you're a senior instructor working on hiring and training our junior instructors or our normal instructors, I'll say. Well, then maybe that person goes to a different pay range. But pay should not be based on how long they've been with you. It should be based on what they do. And if you can charge more, that's when you can pay more. So always keep that in the back of your mind, especially when people are asking for raises. I love the opportunity to talk to people about giving them raises. And it's not a very long conversation because I say to them, I would love to give you more money. Here's what I need you to do for me. I need you to show me or prove to me or do something different that differentiates you so I can charge more for your class times. And then I'm willing to pay you more money. It'll be a very quick turnaround and approval. But I can't continue to pay you more money if I'm not able to charge more money on the other side. So keep that in mind. Also, rather than pay raises, because remember, once you give someone a raise from $10 to 11 to 12 to 13, it's very difficult if the economy were to shift in the other direction. It's difficult to go back to them and say, well, remember I raised you to 13. I now need you to bring you back to a 12 or to 11 or 10. It doesn't work very well. I haven't seen it successful ever. So rather than going, it's a very awkward one, yes. So rather than doing that, I would rather give them some type of sign-on bonus or even a quarterly or year-end type of bonus. Therefore, these are considered more discretionary. I were to keep your pay rate at that $10 or $11 per range. And by the way, I know these are under market. I'm just using them for illustrative purposes. But let's say I'm keeping you at $10 an hour rather than going to 13 or 14. What if I were to say, hey, listen, I'll give you a $500 bonus at the end of the quarter if you stay and you do well and our numbers are good and whatever. Those are types of things you can consider. And then if the market does shift in the other direction, well, that $500 bonus wasn't a guarantee. That was discretionary. So now maybe I don't do that in certain, maybe I move from doing quarterly to semi-annually. Maybe I do it from quarterly to annually, whatever the case may be. But it's not something I've signed up for, and I never obviously have to have that very awkward conversation. So keep in mind, maybe a pay rate rather than a pay raise, consider perhaps a sign-on bonus. Maybe if you've been with me for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, I'll give you a couple of $100. Or I like even better, discretionary bonuses based on the performance of the business. Now, a couple things you can do. We have bonus plans. I won't get into too deep on these, but I just thought, that's something to consider. Bonus plans generally are fixed amounts. Will give you a couple $100 every quarter, every year, every month, whatever you'd like. We also have something called profit sharing plans. These are a little different. Rather than set dollar amounts, they're percentages. So as an example, in my organizations, we have profit sharing plans. At the end of the year, the management has offered or come up with a program where we give away 10% of the profit of the business to our staff. Depending upon your role in the organization, depends upon how much money you get. Our folks are educated on how these work, and they know what they're shooting for, and we're all rowing in the same boat in the same direction. So we found these to be very, very rewarding, and folks to get some benefit out of them. So again, just an alternative thing for you to consider. Lastly, or maybe second to lastly here, 22 considerations. Again, if you did raise your prices, if you're planning on raising your, I'm saying prices, I apologize. If you did raise your pay rates, if you're planning on it, if you do have to find sign-on bonuses or profit sharing or whatever to keep your staff or to hire new staff, well, the biggest thing that you can do to have the biggest impact to pay for that is to consider raising your prices that you charge the public. Okay, some things that people are doing is they did a lot of people I talked to did raises in that August, September timeframe, kind of the beginning of the school year. I know a lot of people getting ready to do a January 1, or I prefer a February 1 raise because it's after the holiday time. So February 1 is a good time for me if I do have to do another price increase. I know there are probably people in the dance world that think you can't do that. I disagree completely. People are always raising prices on you. Cable company, insurance company, medical insurance company, everyone. So there's no reason why you can't. Even though you started the school season, it's still something you can do. There's new factors that have popped up which cause your business to be run more expensively. You need to raise your prices. Don't be afraid to do it. So just something to keep in mind for 2022. Again, if you do find that your payroll percentages are on the high end of those scales, maybe consider doing a price increase. Those that aren't aware, minimum wages are rising. On average, annually, minimum wage across the country is increasing 7.72%. This is a bit of a slide I put up last year, but as you can see, in California, it's going to be $15 in 2022. In Illinois, it's going to be $15 in 2025. In Massachusetts, it's going to be $15 in 2023. So these are all climbing. They're climbing at, again, almost a rate of 8%. You need to make sure you're in front of this. Most of us are paying above minimum wage anyways, but I just, again, want to make sure that I call attention to the fact that pay rates are rising already naturally. You don't have to go too crazy to get on top of those. And then finally, I'll leave my contact information here for anyone who wants to get a hold of me. I'll certainly the slides will be sent out as part of a thank you email that goes out from Jackrabbit. My contact information here is deavercpa.com. That's usually the best way to get a hold of me, or my email's at the bottom, sean@deavercpa.com. We always do free quotes on tax and payroll services, and also we do free tax return reviews. If anybody's for the new year's looking for a new CPA or professional advisor, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. Again, sean@deavercpa.com. And with that, I believe I will stop sharing here and come back in person.
A couple more questions that came in.
Yeah.
Erlene asked, what's a typical pay rate for private lessons? Do you have any benchmark info on that?
Again, a lot of pay rates are done geographically. So certainly a private lesson in Manhattan or LA is going to be different than in Alabama or Georgia.
Yeah.
What I traditionally say is that the key here isn't necessarily your state and what you're being charged. However, that just means you need to charge more in those New York and LA areas. Now, with that being said, what I like to use as a private lesson rate is this. If I'm going to have a class, this is kind of a bit of a mathematical exercise, but I'll give it to you. If I'm going to offer $100 a month for tuition, and on average I have six kids in a class, that's $600 a month I'm going to make. I want to make enough. If someone wants to go to a private lesson, they have to pay me $600 a month. Now that's typically 4 classes in a month. So you're talking $150 for a private lesson times 4. So again, if I'm going to do $150, if you want a private lesson, you got to pay for whatever I'm going to earn off that instructor. And then I typically go a 60-40 split with the instructor. The instructor would get 40% of that, and the house takes 60%. So in that example, it would be $60 to the instructor and $90, $80 to me.
Yeah.
So
And that's what we do at the yoga studio too. It's more like, if we're going to take that spot from an actual class, then I'm not going to lose money by offering a private lesson for somebody, unless sometimes we can do it if it's like out of hours maybe, but
we'll do off hour pricing and things of that nature. But my problem with private lessons, I really don't love them. I also have a rule with private lessons where you have to be in a class to take a private lesson. So a private lesson is over and above. You can't just come in and do private lessons unless there's something very unique, maybe someone with a disability or something along those. It's a different scenario, but in the typical run of the mill, that's how it works. And my big thing is my instructors only have a certain amount of life in them every week. I don't want to strip any undue life out of them, because I need them honestly to be speaking or to be working for me and getting those higher classes taken care of.
Yeah. And then we've got one more from Paula. She's asking, for directors, is there a recommendation for the percentage of admin versus teaching hours? Do you have any advice on that for her?
Great question. Short answer is no. But here's what the problem is this. A lot of people feel that, from my coaches, I have to have 20% admin, 80% coaching, or 30% admin, 70% coaching or something. And for many, many years, I will tell you honestly, I was a 20 to 80% guy. That's only because I heard a really smart guy once stand up in front of the room and said he did that. So I just assumed that's what you had to do. I then one day went back and I said, wait a minute, what the heck am I doing? His business and his needs are totally different than my business and my needs. Why did I do this 20, 80% allocation? So I don't like to just give a rule of thumb like that. For me, the most important thing is that they're maintaining within that 35 to 40% range, or whatever it was that your industry, I said earlier. My goal is to have my folks in the teaching world have 0% admin. It's not going to happen, but I want them to have as little admin time as possible. And we have front office people and managerial people. I put all the admin on them. That's why I hired them to do. That's what they're good at. I want my coaches to coach. I don't want them scheduling meets and ordering uniforms if they don't have to and things of that nature. I want them teaching. I want them dealing with the parents. My admin time, they've got good time for that. That's what I leave for that. So I would say the allocation is this: as little as possible, period.
Awesome. And Brian just asked, can you flash back to the bonus slide? Can you get that, of course, quickly before we wrap up?
I can try here.
And while Sean is doing that, so we will be wrapping up very shortly. So if anybody does have any last minute questions you want to pop in the chat, I'll get them answered for you.
Hopefully you can see that, right? Bonus plans.
Yep.
There you go.
There you go, Brian. So bonus plans generally have fixed amounts or fixed percentage of payroll set in the beginning of the year and can include any or all employees in a bonus plan. You're welcome, Brian. And then another one I've got, what about rehearsal times versus teaching times? So I guess this is probably for a dance studio.
One more time, read it for me.
They're asking, what about rehearsal time versus teaching time?
Yeah, so another one, here's where, listen, have unlimited. as long as you're billing for it. Where I find a lot of, I'm assuming this is in the dance world, where I find a lot of people go wrong is they give all these massive amounts of rehearsal time and they're not charging the client. However, they're giving it, they're paying their staff. So again, as little as humanly possible. I don't like to have a lot of rehearsal time at all. I don't like to pay. If I'm getting paid, I'm happy to pay someone else. That's the overall rule. When you talk about a lot of admin time, a lot of rehearsal time, a lot of behind the scenes time, you're not getting revenue for that. Try to keep it at the absolute bare minimum. Now, does that mean that the Nutcracker's not going to be perfect? Yes, it does mean that. Do I care? No. These are students. These are kids. Actually, a goof up is kind of fun. So I'm okay if we're, if we save 10 rehearsal hours, but we're not perfect. So again, I know we'd have to have some, but you really want to make sure that you keep those to an absolute minimum.
Cool. And Vern asked, do you have any guesses on the ERTC refund? So a couple of people in the chat have said, I submitted mine in June. Somebody else is like, you helped me in August. I still haven't gotten anything.
I did address that at the beginning, but if you didn't hear that, my current analysis guidance is this. The people that we did in March and April are starting to see refunds now. Now, that was because there was a pause for a few months where the IRS did not do any processing whatsoever. So I wouldn't say that it's a 9-month type of deal. 9 month would certainly be on the high end. I think it was probably a 6-month deal because the IRS took 2 to 3 months and just did nothing. So I would probably go with a 6-month lead time. Again, they do have over 20 million applications and less than a half dozen people working on them, and it's all manual, so it's going to take some time.
Awesome. Okay, and then we've got just one last one here. Has to do with Express Payroll. How long should the actual export from Jackrabbit portal to Express Payroll take on average?
3 to 4 seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it's pretty instantaneously.
Dial up, you should be good.
Yeah. As long as you're not using smoke signals, it should come along fairly rapidly.
And then, there's just a couple more here. Brienne asked, where do you set up those fixed fee payroll codes?
Yep. So that's on the export. If you go into Jackrabbit and you go to chronologically on the staff portal and you went to the export to payroll page at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see staff codes. And that's where you'll put those, or I think they're called payroll codes. I'm sorry. You'll put them in there. If you're a client of ours, just give us a call. We can happy to walk you through it.
Awesome. And Shannon says, moving to Express Payroll was the best thing I ever did. Amazing.
Shannon,
service.
we love you. Awesome.
We love you. And if you want to do a testimonial, just shoot me an email, mbaldwin@jackrabbit.com, because we're getting some of those on the go right now. And Jennifer, same thing with you. I'm just trying to read here what Emily is saying.
I see one question from an Emily.
Yeah, that's what I was just reading.
Emily has said, I've heard that a coach should be paid the same rate no matter what job because a team coach who coaches rec classes has the same knowledge. So why pay different rate, and how do you explain that to them? Well, I would disagree completely, Emily. It's a great point. But again, very simply, if a team coach is providing team level service to a kid learning a forward roll, then they should be paid that. But chances are they're not providing that same level of service. They're providing a much lower level of service. So the explanation is very simple. I don't charge the same amount of money or make the same amount of money on a rec class as I would on a team class. Hence, I would do something much different, or paid a much lower rate.
Yeah. And even just to speak to that, I know I'm more like yoga studio-ish, but we have teachers that have done the same 200-hour training with the same teachers and taken the exact same training, but teacher A can fill a class, teacher B doesn't fill a class. So they're not getting paid the same amount of money all the time.
Yeah. It's an easy thing for me to say, Emily, and harder for the coach to digest. But unfortunately, it is, that is the nature of running a business.
It is. So in just a second, just going to get my slides back up here. There we go. So we did go a little bit over. Again, if anybody wants to get in touch with Sean, he had his info up there. And then I'm just going to pop this little guy up for all of you. So coming up in a couple weeks, or no, my gosh, I have lost like, I think 2 weeks in December. Next week, Amber and I, we have our last virtual release notes for the year. There are a lot of cool little surprises. I don't know if product purposely kept them for the week before Christmas. So you will all want to get in touch with us for that. So you can just click on register now. And again, like I said, any of you Express Payroll clients that are out there, if you want to do a little testimonial for our marketing team, just shoot me an email and I'll get you in touch with that person. And Sean, thank you so much. I feel bad. Some people had to drop off, even if they dropped off, or anybody else that's on. I put it in the chat. We are going to be sending out an email on Thursday. It will have a link to the full recording in case you popped on late. And it will also include Sean's slides. And that is it, everybody. Well, Sean, thanks. You were my last official webinar for 2021.
All right. Me too.
Awesome.
My pleasure. Happy
Great.
holidays, everyone.
Bye, everyone.